Hey guys, if you're here, you're probably hoping that I'm just going to tell you which grading company is going to be the best to grade your cards. You'd already know grading can increase the value of your cards by thousands of dollars, but it is an expensive, time consuming, and it can be a somewhat risky process. So you want to make sure you get it right. But unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. The right grading company for you is going to be dependent on your collecting goals and also your personal preferences. So in this video, I'm just going to be a non-biased. I'm going to tell you what the current landscape looks like. And then I'm just going to go through some of the different attributes of each of the three big grading companies. So that's PSA, BGS, and CGC, and have a chat about why you might want to use one over the other. And hopefully once you got all that information, you can be better placed to determine which company is best for you. So this is what the current landscape looks like at the moment in terms of the additional value a grading company will add to your card. So at the very top, you've got the BGS Black Label 10 out of 10. So that means that the card got a 10 in all four of BGS criteria, so service, centering, corners, and edges. And it is extremely difficult to get a Black Label card. Almost every pack fresh card that you pull will not get the Black Label. It is an absolute unicorn. It's in a league of its own. It's in a tier of its own. It can't be compared with anything else. But if you think that your card has a shot at getting the Black Label, you 100% send it to BGS. Next up, you have the BGS 10 Pristine, the CGC 10, and the PSA 10. That's in order of additional value generation. The reason that BGS and CGC will add more value than the PSA will is because they're much harsher graders when it comes to getting a 10 out of 10. PSA's 10 sometimes is a little bit inconsistent and sometimes is compared to the BGS 9.5. I don't think PSA really has its own top tier pristine grade. Its highest grade is a Gem Mint, which is what BGS calls its 9.5. So the difference in value there is purely just due to standards. BGS is higher than the CGC. I think that's because BGS has just been around for quite a lot longer than CGC when it comes to card grading. I think they've been around for an extra 20 years. So the additional heritage and skin in the game just means people are willing to pay a little bit more of a premium. So if you have a look at the 9.5 grades, you'll see that BGS is worth a little bit more than the CGC 9.5. Again, that's for the same reason. BGS has just got a lot more history. It's got more skin in the game. People are loyal to the brand and people are willing to pay a little bit more of a premium. But I think the standards would be pretty similar between the two. If you look at the 9 grades, PSA is a clear winner. And that's just because people have built a culture around collecting PSA cards. People will be willing to pay a little bit more to make sure that the card that they're buying matches the rest of their collection. There are other factors at play as well, but I think that would be the main one. PSA, I think on average would fetch somewhere between 30 and 50% more than a CGC 9. But I wouldn't be surprised if that gap does start closing in the future. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So now we're going to have a look at cost, and this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. So you'll see that PSA and BGS only offer express services. So PSA costs $150 USD per card, and BGS offers $250 USD per card. CGC offers an express option at $60, but it also offers a standard and economy service at $35 and $25 respectively. And yes, it will take a long time, but sometimes it's the only viable option. For example, if you have a card that you think it's going to get a PSA 9, CGC 9, or a BGS 9, and the maximum value of that card is going to be $200 USD, then the only real viable option for you is to go with CGC because the grading cost of PSA and BGS is just going to be too high for the value of your card. You're going to be losing money almost guaranteed. While as for CGC, you might get away with just paying $25, getting a somewhat decent grade that adds more than $25 of value to your card, and you're better off for getting your card graded as a result. If you don't think that grading is going to add at least the cost of the grading service to your card, then don't get it graded at all. It's as simple as that. Now, I have a bit of a hypothesis around this. Because most cards are kind of in that $150 to $300 range, it means that CGC is kind of the only viable option for most people grading at the moment, while PSA and BGS, standard and economy services, are down. And because they're getting so much demand, everyone's going to CGC, it means that people are building a culture of collecting CGC cards. They'll build loyalty towards the CGC brand. They'll get used to collecting CGC cards. And over time, I think the additional value that PSA adds relative to CGC will decrease. And they'll probably end up on a more level playing field. I don't think they'll ever catch up to PSA, but it'll level out a little bit more than what it is because of that kind of additional loyalty and culture people develop around collecting CGC cards. That's just a hypothesis. That's what I think the long-term trend will be. I think that paying $25 to grade your card with CGC now is probably a pretty smart move, particularly if you're grading cards within that $150 to $300 range. All right, so I think the next factor that we should be looking at to help you determine what grading company is best for you is the quality. So there's 4 kind of key factors that I like to use to determine quality, and that is the grading consistency, the security, the case and label quality, and the transparency of the grade that they give. It's really important that a company has high quality across the board, because that will make sure that the company remains sustainable, and it will make sure that it can hold its market share in the long term. The worst thing that can happen is you buy into a company and then in a couple of years, the company doesn't even exist anymore and their grading is worthless. They need to be a company with solid foundations and solid quality in the service or the product that they provide. So we're going to have a look at some of these slabs a little bit more close up, and I'm going to make some observations on what I think. All right, so now we're going to go through the pros and cons of each card as far as quality goes. So if you look at PSA, I think overall the plastic quality isn't as good as the other two. It's more of a lightweight kind of plastic, and it is more brittle in my experience. I've had a couple of PSA slabs break. It's got really good security inbuilt into it. So it's got the fugitive ink. If you ever try to open this case, it would be tamper evident, which is always a really good thing. The consistency in grading has significantly improved in recent years. So anything kind of post 4cert has good consistency in the grade, while as before that, it was very inconsistent. But it is fairly reliable now, so I will give it that. Overall, the quality is obviously good because people have chosen this as their company of choice for a very long time, and people trust PSA for the most part. There are definitely exceptions to that rule. People have had really bad experiences with them, and their reputation has been tainted recently because of that. I think that's largely due to the insane amount of demand they had. It's very hard to keep consistency and quality when you have to hire hundreds or maybe even thousands of people to do your grading. You have to train them all up to think the exact same way in terms of how they rate cards. But overall, the PSA quality is solid, probably like a 8 out of 10. Now, CGC, I actually think they have a nicer quality plastic. I really do like the clear touch. It doesn't have that kind of clouded plastic around it. It's kind of a more firm, slim plastic. I really like it. The label is made out of paper, so it's the exact same as the PSA card. The issue with paper is that it can warp over time, and then when it warps, the card starts looking really trash. And you almost need to get it regraded, but not the end of the world. I don't think that it has any unique security inbuilt into it. I could be wrong. Please let me know if I am wrong. So security is maybe not as good as PSA's, but overall a really solid, high quality slab. I would put it pretty much on par with PSA at around that kind of 8 out of 10 mark. But maybe that's something that does give it a little bit of an edge is the consistency. So they give subgrades centering surface corners, edges, and I've found in my experience the consistency of their grading is a lot more transparent and a lot more consistent. Now finally, BGS has the highest quality plastic for sure. The label is extremely high quality. It's metallic rather than paper, so it doesn't warp, and so that's really good. The only issue is it's kind of bulky and annoying, but it's not the end of the world. The grading consistency, again, very similar to PSA, was very poor in the past, but has improved in recent years. This one doesn't have the subgrades, but normally you can get them. And when you put subgrades on the card, it's very transparent as to what grade they've given you as well. So all three companies are pretty decent in quality. I would almost put them all on par. They all have their pros and cons. But personally, my favorite, and it's very hard not to be biased, but is CGC. Most of my money is in PSA, but I think CGC has kind of had an incentive to grade at a higher quality than PSA and BGS to be able to take some portion of the market, to be able to get the attention. They've really put effort into their quality, and it really does show. Right. Now, the final thing you're going to want to consider when you're choosing your grading company is the aesthetic of the slab. And this is completely a personal preference, but they definitely all have their pros and cons. I would say, PSA, it's got that kind of classic vibe to it. Everyone's really used to that kind of aesthetic these days. I do like the color scheme. I like the font. I like pretty much everything about it. It is a really nice slab. CGC is a little bit more controversial. A lot of people don't love the blue to it, but I do like it. Maybe not with all cards, but particularly ones with like water-type Pokemon with the blue background. I think it looks really good with that. I also really like the fact that they have the clear plastic, and it's a really nice, slim, stackable slab as well. It's really easy to store. I don't have a preference in terms of aesthetic between PSA and CGC, but I think a lot of people are just more used to the PSA slab, so they tend to choose that one. BGS obviously looks really good as a black label, but I don't know, silver label, the BGS 9, not a huge fan. It's just really thick, and they have this kind of plastic layer around the card that means you can't always take nice photos of it, and you can't really see the hollow or the card as well. But really keen to know which aesthetic or which slab do you like the look of the most. But yeah, I think in the end, it just comes down to personal preference. What do you like the look of the most? Which one do you trust the most? The only really thing you need to think about is the cost of the service and the additional value it's going to add to your card. You don't want to be spending $150 if you're only going to end up with a card that's worth $150 at the end. Just be smart about it. I think in the long term, purely because CGC is the only viable option at the moment, people will build a culture around building CGC, and the value of their slabs will be worth more in the future. So personally, I think CGC is a good long-term investment. If you grade with them now, it'll pay off later. But it's completely up to you. If you're loyal to PSA and BGS, completely do not disagree with using them. Just make sure that you're only using them with your expensive cards and that you're making smart financial decisions. If you have any questions or if you want to share your opinions, please feel free to leave a comment or message me on Instagram at PokeRetro. I'd really appreciate it if you guys subscribed. I make videos like this all the time, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.